Hello, everybody. Before I begin, I would like to thank Noah and Lauren for inviting me to talk today and all the amazing staff that's making this happen. And thankful for all the sponsors for making this event happen also. But most importantly, thank you all of you for showing up today. It means a lot to me. Now I'm going to move on. All right. So, hi, I'm Kris Goto. I'm a pen and ink artist based in Honolulu. Actually, my studio is right down the street on that side. I have a few friends that share the building with me, so that's an artist studio up there on Halikaʻawila Street. But I also do murals, and so this one is from Hawaii Walls 2023. This was at the Palama Settlement in Kalihi. So we're actually going to do another festival next month. So if you guys are around, it's going to be in mid-September, and a bunch of us are going to be painting in 3 different public schools in Kalihi. So check us out. But a little bit about me. So some of the examples of work that I've done in the past, I'm a pen and ink artist, so I primarily work on paper. And so very detailed, but my style is definitely very whimsical. And I'm inspired by the local island lifestyle of Hawaii. And, just being here inspire me a lot. Like the colors that I see here, the people I meet, the stories I hear, and obviously the cultures that come together and turn into a whole new culture here. I find them all to be very inspiring. So this was inspired by my love for spam musubi. And I like to... I've always wondered what it feels like to be inside of it, so I just made a bunch of people that live inside of the spam musubi. So they had a rough day, so they're now going back to home. So they're just like, ooh, I'm home, Okay, so this is very different from the kind of line of work that I do in the last 10 years, but this was back in 2019. And I worked on this series called the Lure series, like the fish lure. So I had an idea of women having flowers for their eyes, and when they do, they're not really seeing reality as is, so they're seeing the versions of their reality that they want to see. And in trying to keep feeding themselves of that reality, they have to keep eating these fish lures. I did like a 9-piece series of these women back in 2019, and this was exhibited at Manifest on Hotel Street. Some of you might have seen this before. This is a papaya lady. One of the things that I try to achieve in my artwork is I want the viewers to have that sense of familiarity when they see it and be able to insert themselves into my artwork. So obviously, you know how this feels like. You've been in there before, being wide open in the hot tub. In this case, she's having a great time in the papaya. So if I can be a small person or find a big papaya, let me know, because I would love to totally experience this myself. And my artwork is very whimsical, and I tried to make it very playful, sometimes surreal. But one thing I would like to focus on is the world that exists within my artwork makes sense only within that artwork. So there's a different story to each one of my artwork. Obviously, divers are not really found among kalo leaves, but then in this piece, it kind of makes sense. They're diving through the kalo field, and I don't know what they're looking for, but they're doing a great job, having a greatest time doing it. So that's just the kind of artwork that I do. Let's see. My first exposure to an art community basically was when I lived in Chinatown Artist Loft, and that was in 2010. I lived there from 2010 to 2016, and until then, I've never really met another artist in my entire life. So I moved here in 2006, and I've been doing art my entire life. I wanted to be a manga artist when I was growing up, but in high school, I just decided that wasn't the case. So, I had 2 to 3 years around the time that I moved here that I was just doing something. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was drawing lots of trees. I would be doing watercolor, doing portraits off of magazine pages with charcoal. I had this weird phase where I would paint white canvases paint over and over again for like 2 weeks, and my parents like, "Are you okay?" Like, I just trying to find what I don't know, but nothing is sticking to me, right? So, and then I moved into the Chinatown Artist Loft, And I think that really opened up my, mentality and like allowing myself to be more influenced by foreign elements that's not from within my own body. So spent a good 6 years at the Loft, and I met a bunch of people, networked. Being exposed to other artists doing their own creative thing was very inspiring to me. And fast forward to now, So thank you for inviting me. Anyways, moving on. So they came up to me and say, hey, you want to talk at Creative Mornings? Like, yes, I do. What's the theme? And the theme today is ritual. And I'm like, oh, I have a lot of ritual. But then I was like, how much can I share that is safe to public? So I picked a few that's public friendly. If you want to know more about what I do that I can't share out loud, let me know. Find me later and I'll tell you all about it. But I picked a few. So there's 3 things. I summed it up into 3 things. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. What do I do when I feel unmotivated, uninspired, or stuck? The must-do thing before starting a new project for me, and lastly, how to capture inspiration. This is one of the top question I get is how do you find inspiration? So I'll go through that with you. So first, what do I do when I feel unmotivated, uninspired, or stuck? This is, I think, one of the hardest thing and very disturbing thing any creative will go through at some point in their lives. You sit down and you're like, I have nothing going on. So in hindsight, I think I have 2 times I went through this. One was in 2010. That's around the time when I was starting to exhibit in public spaces. And I think for the first time I had to finish an artwork by a deadline. I've never really had one, so the pressure of trying to finish things on time was really overwhelming to me. So there was a phase where there was one piece I had to finish for a gallery, and I didn't have anything for the first time in my life. So I sat in front of the blank piece of paper. I'm staring at it. It's staring back at me. I cried at it for like a few more days, and I still had nothing. And a really good friend of mine basically gave me an advice that I thought, in hindsight, was the greatest thing that I've ever been taught. He was like, why don't you do 1 artwork a day, but you have to finish it, and then you put it away, and then you do another artwork the next day, and you finish it, you put it away. So you basically have to finish something every day for about a month. And I was like, well, does it have to be big or small? He was like, it can be a line on a piece of paper. You have to sign it, date it, and put it away. It's an exercise for you to kind of like flush out your brain. So I did that for about 30 days, and it really flushed it out. I personally call this when I'm creatively constipated, where you're like so much going on in your head, you're like, I don't know what to start with. And this exercise really helped me back then. So if you are going through it where you have a hard time, being inspired, or, you have a hard time, finishing artwork, or you have a hard time starting one, or you have a hard time committing to one for a long period of time, this might help. So try that out. Another thing I do when I feel like inspiration is not coming to me, I think inspiration to me is very flirtatious. Sometimes it comes and it's like, hello, and then it's like, bye, So when it's not coming to me, it's like when you chase it, they run away, but then when you don't, you're like, I don't need you, and they're like, I'm here, So when I'm unmotivated and feeling like I don't have anything right now, I just move myself away from that situation and do a completely different thing that's not art related. So, that would be, I'm gonna go eat a bowl of pho and then go take a nap, or, go for a walk, go talk to a friend of yours and have a conversation that's not related to anything you're doing. Removing yourself from that situation and basically just doing completely different thing really helped me, get, and then the flirtatious inspiration, like, oh my God, are you not looking for me anymore? And then it just comes back like 2 days later. So highly recommend. So those are a few things that I do when I'm feeling uninspired. Okay, I have an explanation for this illustration, but must do thing before starting a new project. So This is what I do when I move on from an artwork to another that is independent of each other, or a series between different series. Now, certain artwork can take me about 2 weeks. Certain artwork takes me 6 months. Certain project takes a good 8 months to a year. So, but every time I move on to a new artwork or a new series, I always have to cut my nails. And I don't keep 9 nails. The nails goes in the trash can after that. But there's other things that I keep, but you can find me later. I'll tell you all about that. But I cut my nails because I feel like, to me, my past artwork is clinging at my fingertips still, and I feel like it interferes with my new friend that I'm trying to befriend. So it's like, it kind of sounds mean, but I kind of have to sever my ties with my last artwork to move on to it's like making a new friend. A lot of the times when people ask me, when I first exhibit some new artwork and it's fresh out of my brain, it's hard for me to explain what they are sometimes, and it really feels like you're learning to understand a new friend of yours. It's like, I met you, you're great, awesome, but I don't know what this means, but, I find that out later. So, like, it usually comes like a week later. It's like, oh, okay, now I know what you mean. So that's the kind of a creative process I have, but I always have to cut my nails. So if that helps, maybe you should cut your nails too between projects. It might help, you know what I mean? Okay. This is one of the most frequently asked questions, is how do I find inspiration? I mentioned about how my inspiration is very flirtatious. It just comes and goes. And, I don't do a thing to be inspired. I don't do X, Y, and Z and they get inspired. I feel like inspiration just comes when I'm just existing, like driving cars, or like walking to Foodland, or trying to find the best show you in the time section, or like talking to a friend. Or the worst is when you're about to fall asleep, and that's when you have to like jolt out of the bed and you're like, I need to write down, or like text it to myself or call my friend. It's like, what do you want from me? It's like, just listen to my ideas and just remember it. Because I say capture is because inspiration to me comes without any notice, and it just disappears if I don't write it down. And so I always have a notebook or piece of paper or pen handy so that I can just write everything down when it comes. Or else there's a handful of ideas that I'm like, oh, that was a good idea, but I just can't remember what they are, So always write it down, and I highly recommend not throwing away any of your ideas, however small or it's not good enough for you, or like just doesn't feel right. You just have to always keep your ideas written and then put it away, because there are certain ideas that I went back to 5 years later, like the lady with the fish flowers in her eyes. That idea came to me in 2014. I literally wrote down on a Post-it saying, woman with flowers in their eyes, and then like a really rough drawing of what it looks like, and it sat on a Post-it on my desktop for a good 5 years. And I really believe that certain ideas takes a long time for, you have to mature as an artist and creative to be able to execute that idea that came to you, right? So I always make a note of keeping everything, no matter how unimportant it may seem to you at that time. And 5 years later, it will be beneficial to, you're ready to execute it. You're like matured enough to be able to execute that idea. It was interesting because I was reading this book called The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman one time, and they had this interview printed out in the back of the book, and he was like, I had the idea of this book, The Graveyard Book, 25 years ago. And at that time, I wasn't a skilled and experienced writer enough to be able to execute this idea. So in essence, this book took me 25 years. So you'll never know what you'll need later, so always write down what you have to do. You might come back to it later. So that's how inspiration and this is kind of like the relationship I have with my inspiration. The bottom line today is these are my ritual and the things that I do, but it doesn't necessarily mean it works for you guys. The point is that I'm trying to make is that I would love everyone to find out what works for you. And a lot of the questions, one other question that I get is when young artists come to me to talk about their artwork, and they always ask me, like, am I doing the right thing, or is this the right way to do this? And I'm like, if it sounds good to you, that's the only right answer you need. Because I feel like when I was younger, and I still work on this, you want to please people, you want to please your clients, but at the same time, you also trust your instinct. But it's hard to say no sometimes, when your clients are paying you to do certain things, and you're like, I wanted you to do this way, and you're like, but in your gut, it's like, that's gonna look so bad, So I've been getting better, Now I'm more comfortable saying, no, you hired me for a reason. You've seen my past work. My past work speaks for itself. You need to have faith in me. So being able to say no is one of the, if you have any ritual that works for you to be able to confidently say, no, I don't want to do that, then let me know, because I definitely am working on that still. So I guess the question is, find out what works for you. It definitely, you'll learn it, find it through experience, lots of crying tears, lots of agony. It's going to be painful. But at the end of the day, you'll have all this, ways to protect yourself so that your creative process is smooth and it's authentic and you are staying true to yourself. So hopefully some of the stuff that I shared today was somewhat interesting. But yeah, I think that's it for me today. Well, thank you for coming. Woohoo!
A question I have is, when is ritual helpful, and when has it been a hindrance to your work?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, when I don't have the capacity to make the decision for myself sometimes, and I'm overwhelmed, I think going through a familiar routine definitely helps for me to streamline things better. So, but then sometimes when I have like the urge to do something kind of out of line, but then there's a part of me that's like, I still need to cut my nails. Then that kind of gets in the way. But I'm trying to find a balance still, to be able to mentally go, I'm going to go through this to do X, Y, and Z, to when I'm like, I'm going to disregard everything and then trying to do something new. So it kind of depends on the situation, I think. But I'm working on it.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. We have a question right here.
Hi. Okay, so you
Hello.
kind of touched on this a little bit when you were saying, like, when I have work, I rely on my past work to kind of speak for me. It's like, you saw what I've done before. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, what are some ways that you keep your confidence going as an artist?
I'm still working on that still, but I try to remind myself that my artwork. So the funny thing is that I have a very intimate relationship with my artwork. My art is me and I am my art, so I've never really been separated from it. So I tend to take things personally when people make a very business-based decision, for my artwork, saying like, oh, you didn't get in, or I don't want you to do this, or something like that. But I try to remind myself that my artwork, I produce the best work when I'm the one in charge. So I try to remind my client, my artwork speaks for itself. It got me to where I am now, and it got you to come to me to hire me for certain things. So you really need to trust me and the process that I have, because the more cooks in the kitchen, the worse it's going to be. So I have reminded some clients of mine recently. It's like, you need to have faith in me, because there's a reason why you picked me for this project. So you gotta just keep telling yourself that you did amazing work in the past, and it speaks for itself. So you need to, I always remind myself to trust my artwork more, because I tend to not have faith in it sometimes also. So I think I personally work on treating my artwork better. Yeah, hope that helps. I don't know.
Your work seems so driven by intuition and something that's innate inside of you.
Yes.
And I love that. That's why I'm so inspired by you.
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
curious, like, what is the next mountain you want to climb creatively?
Oh, in what kind of platform? Just in general? What am I scared of? I'm still afraid of being influenced by what I see. Try to limit my time on my Instagram, for instance. I try not to look at other people's artwork sometimes when I have certain things going on. I'm definitely very still afraid of being affected because my art is such an innate thing for me. So I think one thing I would like to work on is to allow myself to be more inspired by others and not necessarily just truly rely on my brain to figure it all out, because that's one of the things I'm working on. I hope that answers your question.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for your talk. I was curious if you've ever retired a ritual that hasn't worked for you anymore, and or like how you know when a practice might be worth adopting as a new ritual.
So I picked up this habit from just general public that I think I spoke to one of the guys from Honolulu Coffee Company, which is one of our sponsors. Hello. But I used to drink a lot of coffee, and I thought, ooh, I'm going to drink coffee and be productive all day and create, right? And so because everybody else is drinking coffee, and I love the ambience of a cafe. I love the smell. I love the image of me drinking coffee. So I'm like, yes, I'm gonna do and be creative. But coffee is inspiration, creative motivation killer for me. But then I somehow persisted on drinking coffee because I think in hindsight, I enjoyed the image of me drinking coffee than what coffee actually does to me. So that's one thing I abolished. I was like, nope, no coffee. So I've been coffee free for about a year. And it really, it's funny because coffee does relieve constipation, but it constipates my brain. So stop drinking coffee, and I've been really up and bright in the morning. I'm a morning person, so I'm up at like 5:30, just in general, So coffee is one of the things. What else is there? I think that might be it. Other rituals I still keep because I feel like it's just things that, certain things that you do. And, this is one of the things that you miss when you go traveling is because you want to go back to your routine. So, but coffee, I definitely was like, okay, goodbye coffee, but I still love you from afar. So I converted into matcha latte now. So less caffeine, I think, helps a little bit. I know how. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Can we have a hand for Kris?
Yay, thanks for coming.